Safety, as you all know, is a situation wherein we all come together, and it's a holistic approach we can take such that we can solve this issue. And our speaker today, Mr. Piyush Tiwari, so he's the founder and CEO of SaveLife Foundation, and he's the individual who has vouched for the Good Samaritan Guidelines. Now, what are Good Samaritan Guidelines? He'll take you over the entire breadth of it, but in short, it says how good of a citizen you can be and actually help others. People lose lives in road accidents and road related safety issues due to the fact that proper action has not been taken in the lieu of time, right? So if we properly act in accordance to time and actually help the other person who is in the current predicament, we can actually save a lot of lives and probably save not only one life but the entire family who gets impacted. So with this, I would like to welcome our host, Mr. Girikumar Kumaresh. um, Mr. Girikumar actually presided over the last webinar on the Motor Vehicle Act, and we'd like to uh, have Sir take over the webinar. And Sir, so could you please um, take it over? And for a brief introduction of our esteemed host, so Mr. Girikumar is the senior architect of Accident Research India and Asian topics at Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions Private Limited, and he has over 12 of years of work experience in advanced vehicle safety engineering and research, along with a plethora of 40 research papers and journals in leading journals like IEEE and SAE, as well as being leading data work stream in World Economic Forum Road Safety India, as well as the board advisory member of Indian Road Safety Campaign. So with that, I'd like to give the honors to Mr. Girikumar. So, sir, can you take it over?
So thank you very much, IRSC, for giving me this opportunity to host this session. And I'm very privileged to be on the session, the webinar series number 2, which is mainly on the safety related to safety and Indian road safety thing. So it's really good that last week we just had a good overview on the topics of on the road safety, and the first speech which was delivered was mainly on the basics of road safety. What is it all about? What are the data availability? What is the report that we have to look at, other things? And followed by which I also touched upon 5 pillars and also 4 E's: engineering, enforcement, and also empowerment, and also on infrastructure side, and also a little bit on the decade of action and road safety engineering from different aspects. Yeah. And also I touched upon on the last part a little bit on the Motor Vehicle Act, but I did not go much deeper into it because it has different arms and verticals. And there was various questions which was asked in the last session by various other people, including students, and there were so many questions on Good Samaritan Law Act. That's where me, Dipanshu, Amar all discussed that who is much better than our own Piyush Tiwari, who is the CEO of SaveLife India Foundation, can address this problem, because I know him since almost like 5-6 years now in the road safety domain. And yeah, we meet in most of the conferences and share the common goals of saving lives. So that's where we are all connected together. So it's my privilege, but I will not give you much details on what is the law board and other things. To be very precise and to give a short introduction for the session, Piyush Tiwari is one of the leading socialist and also a good Samaritan in India, who really brought this concept of Good Samaritan law, and he went through the lot of steps, and I've heard his speeches. So it's really hard to get something on an amendment act. So we have him on the board today. So I'll just give a short introduction about him. And our esteemed speaker is Mr. Piyush Tiwari today, and he's the founder and CEO of SaveLife India Foundation, a non-profit organization committed towards improving the current road safety infrastructure and apparatus, implementing Good Samaritan laws, and reducing road fatalities by 30%, especially on the Mumbai-Maharashtra Express Highway. He had been one of the principal advocates for implementation of Motor Vehicle Act 2019, and he is the recipient of the prestigious Prince Michael International Road Safety Award, the Rolex Award for Enterprises, GQ Most Influential Young Indians 2016, and 2015 Indian Man of the Year, amongst many other laurels over his illustrious career so far. And his interests lie in the conjunction of policymaking implementation at the grassroots level, and thus he is a board member of various organizations starting from change.org, Youth Ki Awaz, Avanti Fellows, and is also a member of Committee of National Road Traffic Safety and Traffic Planning in India, and advisory board for FIA High Level Panel for Road Safety, and is also part of GRSP program, which we all work together and share the common views of saving life. So today I would just give the stage to our esteemed guest, and all the audience just have a good insight of how this law came about, and get a view of a very well-versed person in the domain of road safety. And please mark all your questions, and end of the session we can have one short question answer session if time permits, and then we can go about that. So welcome, Mr. Piyush Tiwari, and the stage is all yours.
All right. So thanks, Giri. Thanks, the Indian Road Safety Campaign for organizing this session. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that everyone is staying safe and indoors in these rather uncertain times. The question about the Good Samaritan law is quite a legitimate question to ask, and it's been a challenge since we got the law back in 2016 to get people to know about it. So I'm especially thankful to IRSC for giving us the platform to speak about it. And my expectation from all the participants here is to go out and spread the word about it, because unless we know what our rights are, we won't have the confidence to go ahead and save a life. So just by way of background, I started SaveLife in 2008 following the passing of a young family member in a road crash, a young cousin. And following the circumstances surrounding his demise, I started studying the issue of road safety. At that point of time, I had no clue of what road safety was, what emergency medical care was, and so on and so forth. And a lot of my work was primarily focused on, working in the private equity space. And when I started researching the issue, I learned primarily three things. I learned that nearly 50% of people who die or died back then in road crashes in India died despite having treatable injuries. They could have been saved if they got care on time. The second thing I discovered was that in the previous decade, close to 1 million people had died in road crashes in India. Now take a moment and think what that really means. 1 million families drastically impacted. Nearly 50% of them or more come from extremely poor backgrounds, and their families getting pushed into poverty almost instantly as a result of that. And most tragically, the fact that majority of those million could have been saved if they had received care on time. So I think that's something that I learned, and it became more or less unacceptable to me to allow for that situation to continue, especially the situation where people were not getting care, even from bystanders and passers-by who were witnesses or who were passing by the scene of the crash. Giri, can I request you to mute your computer because there's some background noise coming in? Thank you. So that's really how SaveLife Foundation came into being. Now, most of us know what being helpless feels like. Most of us know what groping in the dark feels like. And so the initial couple of years of SaveLife were really around about that. We were really trying to figure out how we can bring about this change. It was a startup organization. It had limited resources. Majority of funding was coming from my salary at the time, from the private sector, and I had not yet moved full time to the organization. So there were various challenges at that point of time. But we said to ourselves that let's start small. Let's do what we can, and then maybe scale up the effort. So what we really started off with was to try and train police officers to become medical first responders to the injured. And this became very important for us because in the entire life cycle of saving a life, we realized, or I realized, that given the absence of ambulances in many parts of the country back then, it was the police that was doing the commendable job of taking injured persons to hospital in many cities. But unfortunately, not many were trained on how to intervene while during transportation, how they could use just their hands and common sense to revive somebody or to save someone's life. So we said, let's start off by training the police in those skills. So we started our first training program. I still remember very distinctly, on 9th of March 2009, we conducted our first ever training program for the police on how do you save an injured person's life with traumatic injuries while rushing them to hospital. And we continued that training, every weekend. On weekdays, I was working. On weekends, I was giving all my time to SaveLife. And we set up a group of volunteers. We partnered with AIMS Trauma Center in Delhi and a bunch of other hospitals, and started training police officers in how do you save an injured person's life. Now, we didn't know if that program was going to have any impact or not. But on 4th of June 2009, I received a call from the Deputy Commissioner of Police South in Delhi, informing me that that morning at about 4 a.m., a motorcyclist called Tekchand Silotia was on his way back home from late night shift, and he was run over by a vehicle and was grievously injured when the police team that was patrolling the area arrived on the scene, and they saw him. He was choking on his blood, and they put him in the PCR van, the police control room van in Delhi, and started rushing him to AIMS Trauma Center. And while rushing him to AIMS Trauma Center, they essentially performed the tasks that we had taught them during that first training that we had done on 9th of March. And this turned out to be one of the first batches, part of the first batches, this team of PCR personnel. And before entering AIMS Trauma Center, they were able to revive the victim. Now, when that happened, it told both us and the police that this program had a lot of potential to save lives. But what it also did was that it started getting us onto the table, which basically meant whenever there was a discussion happening around emergency medical care, around road safety, around saving lives, we were invited into that discussion because the police and other authorities knew that our work was beginning to save lives. And what I started doing at that occasion, on those occasions, was to start asking the policymakers and the authorities that, training police is good, and we will continue to do that. But the key need of the hour is to insulate and protect people who are afraid to help an injured person because of various formalities and so on and so forth. And this we were able to establish that it was not apathy. You know, initially when I started work, and in my own case, the assumption was that it was because of apathy that people would leave the injured person dying on the road, that Indians just didn't care. And as I discovered, and as I knew that this was absolutely wrong, people did stop. There were a very few set of people who were apathetic, maybe, who wanted to make a video and so on and so forth, but most people cared. Most people wanted to take action. But unfortunately, because of certain fears, they had hesitation. And all they would do would be offer water, or throw water at people to keep them alive, awake, but not be able to take the next step to save that person's life. They will be hesitant to call the police in many cases because they would fear that their name and number would come on the other side and that they would be called to the police station. Many feared that they would have to go to the court for many years as a witness. And many feared that if they took a victim to hospital, they will have to bear the expenses. The hospitals might detain them, and so on and so forth. So we discovered that it was not apathy. It was a very profound sense of fear that was causing this inaction. And so at these meetings that I started attending with policymakers and authorities, we started asking for protecting these people, protecting common citizens who would come forward to help the injured from any kind of legal and procedural hassles. And I got a lot of assurance. A lot of people, said that yes, we should do it. I met many MPs, members of parliament. I met the minister at that time who said, yes, we should definitely do it. But 2 years went by and nothing happened. And during that period of time, every time there was a report in the papers about an injured motorcyclist, an injured car person, an injured pedestrian lying on the road and dying and bleeding to their death while waiting for someone to help, every time that news came up, I took it as a personal failure because we were not able to move fast enough. And I think that sense of urgency eventually got me to quit my job and join Save Life full-time in 2011 to really launch a national campaign to ask for this insulation for Good Samaritans from any kind of legal hassles, which would go on to be called the Good Samaritan Law. So in 2012, after getting many assurances that didn't turn into action, we decided to move. I decided to move the Supreme Court of India. The Supreme Court took cognizance of the matter, saying that this is right to life and we should hear Save Life out. And they immediately, in 2012, issued a notice to the Government of India asking for their response on our petition. And the government essentially responded saying that it is the police's right under the CRPC to detain and question whoever they want and to get to the bottom of the crash and the incident. And therefore, nothing could be changed. The Good Samaritans can't be protected. And it was more of an obligation on them as opposed to a right that they should help someone. So the process kept going back and forth. Our argument in the case was that preservation of life is paramount and no procedure should come in the way to executing that right. And that argument is something that the Supreme Court started getting more inclined towards, because we were talking about preserving the fundamental right to life and how the Good Samaritan Law would preserve people's right to life. And the case went on for about 4 years, during which time we went to the parliament as well. We got over 100 questions asked in the parliament. We took out marches. We had massive support from the media. We had Satyamev Jayate, the show hosted by actor Amir Khan, talk about the issue and really try and spread the message about the Good Samaritan Law nationally. And essentially what happened was that there was a four-pronged pressure, one coming from the Supreme Court, one from the media, one from the public, and the other from within the government, from the parliament and from other interested officials, to really have the government not oppose the enactment of a Good Samaritan law. So eventually, in 2015, the government of India filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court stating that they no longer opposed the ask for a Good Samaritan law. And on 30th of March 2016, the Supreme Court, under Article 141 and 142 of the Constitution, which gives the Supreme Court powers to, in effect, give the power of law to their order, passed a judgment instituting a nationwide Good Samaritan law, which essentially protected people from three kinds of issues. They protected and insulated people from being forced to become witnesses. So as per the Good Samaritan law, it is up to the Good Samaritan to choose to be a witness. It protects them from any kind of intimidation, any kind of harassment, any kind of being forced to give their details if they don't wish to do so. And it insulates them from detention at hospitals and from hospitals forcing them to make any payments for the treatment of the injured person that they would have brought to the hospital. So broadly, these are the sort of guidelines that were enacted. Eventually, now, as part of the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act of 2019, the Good Samaritan law has been subsumed into the Motor Vehicle Act, which also now, in addition to the Supreme Court backing, it now gives it parliamentary backing and makes it a legislation, law of the land, so to say. And so as of now, as on date, all of us are protected and insulated from any kind of legal hassles and any kind of fear if we were to step forward and help an injured person on the road. I would urge all of you to visit the website goodsamaritanlaw.in, which has very detailed description of what the guidelines are around the protection of Good Samaritans, specifically around police procedures, court procedures, as well as the hospital procedures. And what the website also does is that if you feel that you have helped someone and your rights under the Good Samaritan law have been violated, you can actually also let us know about it, because as the lead petitioners in the case, we still have the ability to go to the Supreme Court and talk about how the law is not being followed, if it has not been followed in certain cases, even speak on your behalf of the government of your state or of your district, essentially impressing upon them that the Good Samaritan law is something that that needs to be implemented, and people who are helping needs to be insulated from any kind of legal hassles. So we are standing by you as SaveLife Foundation. If you come across any victim of harassment, or if you yourself are subjected to any kind of hassles or challenges while trying to help an injured person on the road. So with this, I'll stop. I do know that there might be quite a few questions about this, so I would not want to continue speaking, but actually see if there are any questions, and I'll be quite happy to answer. Once again, thank you, IRSC, for inviting me, and thank you, Giri, for hosting this session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Piyush. It was really great to listen to you, the whole journey of Good Samaritan law, what the journey which you went through all these years, and the real Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, which was created in 1988, got amended in 2019. Yeah, so it took such a long time for the government to amend so many things. What important topic is, like, I was just randomly asking many people as well here. They all are more interested towards the increase in the safety fines, the legal aspects, and the point of the non-wearing of helmet from 100 rupees to 1000 rupees. They only know one chapter of it. There are 64 chapters under MV Act, but they're not aware of it. So this is one important thing. We, as a community, we have to really look into it, how to spread this message in all the form. So one important thing which I was just reading in the morning was this law is one of the important law, and I feel that in some of the, in your website only, they clearly say that 84% of the Indian citizens do not know about this law. They're not aware of it. Yeah, everyone needs to do something good for the people who are hurt on the road, but something is stopping with them. Yeah. My first question to you is like, what is that we can do, or what is the thought process that you have in your mind to change this 84% to the ground zero? It's a big challenge, but at least we can try as a whole. And we have many participants here. I went through the participant list, and you can see people from the police, people from the medical, also from the student community, and also the NGO and activists are there in today's session alone. Yeah, and also I see the traffic commissioner and transport commissioner also on call today. So it is a good opportunity for us to just share some thoughts, how exactly we can spread the awareness and understanding of Good Samaritan law. And also, is there any quick bites for the people to quickly grasp this concept and help it? So your thought on this, Piyush?
Sure. Spreading awareness about the Good Samaritan law has been a challenge, not just for us, but also for the government. Now, the question really is that I would pose to all of you is that, how do you tell 1.3 billion people that they have a new right? And how do you do it in a way that they register it and they remember it and they act upon it, right? So it is a Herculean task to take this message to everybody in the country. What SaveLife has been doing is that we have been partnering with different state governments on the overall issue of road safety. So we currently have institutional partnerships with the government of Maharashtra, government of UP, government of Delhi, government of Karnataka, to look at road safety overall. And within that realm, to also look at spreading the word about the Good Samaritan law and to get more people to exercise the Good Samaritan law. So for example, in the case of Delhi, a program has been started in Delhi called Farishte Dilli Ke, where Good Samaritans who actually end up helping critically injured persons are recognized by the state government, by the chief minister, and also rewarded for their act. Now, these are things that will always help spread the message. But I think what we all can do as a community of people who are concerned about this issue is to take some time out and talk to at least the people who we are connected to, who we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, at least make them aware of this law, because this will spread through a chain mechanism. This is not necessarily going to spread through a multi-million-dollar TV campaign or so on and so forth, because there's simply resource limitation when it comes to taking it out. So I think that's one. The second piece is that we really appreciate the government incorporating this within the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, because now this will go down to the district level, go down to the grassroots level as part of the implementation of a parliamentary legislation. So that will actually help the process. The rulemaking is still underway. We are assisting the government of India with the rulemaking process for the Good Samaritan guidelines and the law. But once this is out into the districts, I think it will really help. And it's a pleasure to hear that there are transport commissioners and police officers here on the line today, because there is a significant role that our authorities can play in taking this message out. our government offices, especially the transport offices and police offices, are visited by people on a very regular basis. These are all public places. And so publishing the guidelines and putting them out there for the people to view, I think could be a great, service to this law and service to the injured victims whose lives will get saved as a result of this legislation. So there is some way to go. We've tracked how much time it takes for new laws to be implemented, and it does take 2 to 3 years for everyone to get to know about it and for the grassroots level implementation to start. So we are hoping that this process, of this message reaching the ground culminates soon, and we can, get people to start exercising this right and start helping the injured. I have to say that things have dramatically improved. Back in 2012, when we surveyed, when we carried out a national survey, we learned that 3 out of 4 people were hesitant to help out of fear. Today, that number has changed. Now we know that nearly 50% of people are willing to help, and that is being reflected in many cities where crashes have improved, have come down, deaths have come down. So there is some impact, but it will take some more time before it reaches the very grassroots level.
Okay. Thank you, Piyush. There are so many questions which is just popping on, and it is making me difficult to select the questions and ask you. But one more thing, one baseline question which I came from one of the NGO activists is that what is that SaveLife India Foundation is doing for spreading this act, and also what is that you are lacking that we can support you on to take this mission forward?
So we are using every means that we can to reach out to people. So we are relying on radio. We are relying on social media quite a bit. If you go to our Instagram channel, SaveLife Foundation, you will see that there are 3 videos that we recently posted that are talking about the 3 different aspects of this law. We are followed by about 88,000 people on Facebook. So we're relying on them to spread the message. So as a small organization with limited resources, we are doing the best we can. But I think, as I said, this has to be a network issue. This has to be a chain reaction. So if all of us here on this call agree that at least for the next 24 hours on our social media handles, on our outreach mechanisms, if we can just talk about this specific law by sharing either the videos or the messages or the link to the GoodSamaritanLaw.in website, I think this will help. So as a small organizations, as a small nonprofit, we've not been able to do much except for rely on social media and some level of radio and TV, but there's still a long way to go. And Satyamev Jayate talking about it, other large networks talking about it, IRSC talking about it, actually helps take the message forward.
Okay. So thank you very much. And there is another question from the doctor. I just read out the question because a lot of medical terminology. As a former senior anesthesian faculty from some prestigious college, my vision is to lay focus on bystanders helping instantly in road accident as per American Heart Association norms, but modifying as per Indian situation has led my passion to grow in the last 25 years, incorporating sequential handling of CPR as a mandatory provision of road life advocated by MORT for the passer-by can turn the tables into the current scenario. Okay, if I can understand the question, a doctor is asking that a passerby a common citizen can do a CPR, and does this help in most of the road fatalities or accidents? Can this be incorporated in the Good Samaritan, or is it advised is the question, which is what I got it here.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a very, very relevant and a very, very valid point. Earlier, as I was mentioning in the story of SaveLife, we did start with training, and we were training the police and some citizens. But action comes with 2 things. Action is a combination of skills and confidence. So we were being able to impart the skill to people, but we were not able to give them the confidence that they will not be subjected to any kind of hassles if they use those skills. So now that we have the confidence, now that we have the Good Samaritan law, the timing is right for our medical community, our NGOs, our civil society, our schools. And I just saw somebody had commented that this should be taken to schools. Absolutely. The timing is now right for us to take these skills of saving people's life into the schools, into the community, because now we know that if people come forward to help, they will not be hassled, they will not be intimidated, and they will not be subjected to proceedings that earlier they would be. So I think there is the timing is right, and along with the honorable doctor who mentioned this and many other medical professionals, we can really combine forces to take this to the ground. So SaveLife Foundation is currently training about 10,000 people each year, but that's a drop in the ocean, right, when it comes to 1.3 billion people. So if we can combine forces and ensure that basic life support becomes a life skill that we give to our students, our professionals, our colleges, our Anganwadis, our self-help groups, I think this can transform the situation on our roads. It will not just help in saving lives, it will also enhance the value of life when people know how to save one. So it will most certainly have a great impact. So thank you for that point, and thank you for that question.
Okay. So thank you very much. This was a very informative thing. And there's another question from a teacher here. He clearly says this education on road safety and Good Samaritan guidelines has to be mandatory in all the school curriculum. Yeah. But as of now, this is not considered. And is there any provision as per NEP, National Education Policy 2019? Is it considerative of this? And can it be included? What are your thoughts on it?
I think a person who's an expert at school education is better equipped to answer that question. And if you ask me as a road safety activist, I would say a big yes. But if you ask a climate change activist, the climate change activist will say yes, everything around climate change should be in our books. If you talk to somebody who's doing HIV, they should say yes, everything about HIV should be in our books. If you talk about animal rights, they'll say yes. So in my view, the reason I feel that the issue of road safety should be in our books is because of the large number of young people that are getting killed in road crashes every day, every month, and every year in India. And I think that's the very single reason why we should have that in our books. Now, back in 2013, we were part of a conversation with CBSE and the Department of Education to have this incorporated. We know that AIMS had developed some curriculum around this. We know that many other organizations have worked hard to build curriculum around this. The challenge is to be able to fit it into the regular curriculum of a school. And so it is time that we expand our focus from merely just talking to people who work in road safety to people who work in education, who work in healthcare, who work in other parts of our ecosystem, to understand how best the issue of road safety can be incorporated. Should it be as part of a training session? Should it be as part of a book? Should it be made part of SUPW sessions? But I think that is a point that we need to engage with educationists on and answer that. And I'm unfortunately not an educationist, so I won't be able to answer that effectively. Although I do believe that it should be incorporated into the system.
Okay, thanks for that. So another question was just popping up. This from a statistician. He clearly asked that before Good Samaritan Law and after Good Samaritan Law implemented, what are the benefits that you see? Did you see a change in the number of accidents and fatalities? But as per MOT statistics, it clearly says 151,000 fatalities, which increased from 140, 41,000, 46,000 to 151. despite of having this law and around 25% of the country or 15% of the country knowing this law, that is not showing in a statistic. So that's the question. So
sure,
it's yours.
So that's a very relevant question. I have two broad points to make on that. The first point is that a law is as good as it is implemented. And we know that the implementation of the Good Samaritan law is as weak as its awareness. So it is yet to be fully rolled out into our districts. We know that the states, very few states have issued state level guidelines around this. We know that there are limitations in terms of how this law is being implemented. So first is that we can't say that merely because the law got passed, lives will start getting saved overnight. Things will have to be implemented, things will have to be tracked, and data will have to be brought in to see what is working and what is not working. What we do know from the 201st report of the Law Commission of India is that this law will enable bystander care, which has the potential of saving as many as 60 to 70,000 lives each year. So once we know that this is appropriately implemented, once we know that all hospitals are displaying the Charter of Good Samaritans, all police stations are displaying the Charter of Good Samaritans, we know that people genuinely believe that they will not be harassed. I think things will start changing. That's one. The second thing is that the increase in road crashes is a factor of the occurrence of road crashes happening in itself, right? And we know that road safety still remains a very significantly under-addressed issue in our country, as opposed to many other, issues of public health. We know that it is the #1 killer of young people in India. We know that it's the single biggest cause of death when it comes to injury, and yet, there is appropriate action at different levels to be taken. Somebody here asked, mentioned about road engineering related issues, right? When we are working on several highways in the country, including the Mumbai-Pune Expressway, a couple of highways in UP, and on the Outer Ring Road in Delhi. And we are seeing that road engineering is a significant contributor to road crashes in our country. And it rarely gets spoken about. So when you combine Good Samaritan law with action around road engineering, improving police enforcement through technology, improving the filtration system, which is the way people get onto the streets to drive, again, by using technology, and by improving the other aspects of trauma care, when you bring all of that system together is when we will start saving lives, which is why we talk about road safety as a systemic approach and not merely as actions taken in silos. I can have a Good Samaritan law, but a Good Samaritan law will not fix a shoddy road. I can fix a shoddy road, but a shoddy road will not fix enforcement issues. And if I fix enforcement issues, enforcement will not fix trauma care. All of them will have to operate together as a system, as a co-jointed system, as opposed to a disjointed system. So our approach at SaveLife is really to look at the issue as a co-jointed system, and which is why we're not just working on the Good Samaritan law, we are working on the entire life cycle of trauma care, we are working on road engineering issues, we worked on the Motor Vehicle Act, we are working on police enforcement issues. Our partnership with Maharashtra Police will now see use of drones, for example, for traffic enforcement for the first time. So there are some things that are being brought together to ensure that nothing is left when it comes to the aspect of saving lives.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Piyush. It's exactly what we covered in the last week as well. So many people say, is it a problem with the driver? Is it a problem with the infrastructure? Is it a problem with the hospitals? So generally, any accidents, it has to work with all the pillars. So it's an ecosystem which will really save accidents, not one particular pillar. This is a very important point, which I also emphasized in the previous sessions. And you also reiterated the whole process. So people on this session, please do understand when you say something or that this accident is caused by speed, like reckless driving or a rash driving, That is the only legal aspect with which you can punish a person. And there is no other cause for it. And there are few other things. For example, why did he speed up? Or what was the road condition? Was there a tree? Is there an unscientific design of roads? So all these things matter. So it's just an ecosystem which allows. So one small instance which I wanted to give you is that when we read the cause of the accident, we see 78% of the cause is human cause. So is it human that is willingly going to make that? No, right? But there is no other thing that we can dominate. But if you slice the accidents into much deeper, you will really understand the depth of what is the real root causes. Yeah. So in that way, like I think what Piyush covered is really right, and it should be the complete ecosystem which has to really play upon it. So there is a question, Piyush, next I think by one of the police officer and one of the citizen as well. So the question goes like this: is there a okay? Let me reform this. Okay, so okay, would potential hit and run cases be included in the law if the driver who has accidentally injured a person brings them to the hospital? To what extent would that driver be protected under the law? It's a very valid question. So I think you got the question.
Yeah, it's a very relevant question. So what the Good Samaritan law does is it delinks the act of saving someone's life with the act of investigating the incident. It delinks that. Earlier, what was happening was that whether you have hit another person or not, even if you were passing by and you see an injured person on the road, you would take that person to hospital. And the assumption would be that you have brought the person to hospital because you hit the person. That was the standard assumption. In fact, when I had taken a person to hospital in Bombay, the first question I was asked was not, thank you for bringing him, or where did the crash take place? What was the time of the crash? The first question was, कि आपने इसको कहाँ पे मारा, right? So the challenge was that it was linked together. What the law does is that it delinks the act of saving someone's life with the act of investigation. Now, if the investigation reveals that the person who brought the victim to hospital is the same person who was responsible for the crash, then the law will take its own course, and it is up to the court to whether take the action of bringing the injured person to hospital as a favorable act and then give some relief to the driver, or to take other measures. But I will give you an alternative scenario. The alternative scenario is that the crash becomes a hit and run case, right? Where the victim is lying on the road, the driver is too afraid, the driver runs away, and the victim doesn't get help because there is no Good Samaritan law, and the victim dies. So we have two sets of losses there. One set of loss is that we have lost the victim, who is also a potential witness. The second loss is that we have lost the opportunity of ensuring that we have at least some information about the crash that a Good Samaritan could have given to us. Now, we all know that police investigation requires primarily two important things: place of occurrence and time of occurrence. If we give the police place of occurrence and time of occurrence, our police officers are capable enough to find out the chain of incident and to actually catch hold of whoever is the perpetrator. So it is very important to delink the two. And I think what we were able to successfully do, and what the Supreme Court also held, was that the procedure of investigation, the procedure of the law, should be delinked from preserving the life, because preservation of life as per our constitution is paramount, and therefore the delinking was required. So it's a very relevant question, and it does not influence, the Good Samaritan law does not influence how the investigation is happening, and does not protect the person who has hit the injured person. It might give only momentary protection by way of avoiding detaining the Good Samaritan on the assumption that it is a Good Samaritan and not the perpetrator. So the entire system is based on trust as opposed to suspicion. And I think that's the big culture shift that we're trying to bring in here through this legislation.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I think this answer I think more than 10, 12 questions which came under the same doubts which everyone had. So thank you very much for that. That's also very important to understand there is a dealing between these two things to understand that. And the next question goes as GSL, Good Samaritan Law, is it imposed in a central level, or is it only for few states adopted and implemented? And we heard that only Karnataka is called the first state in 2016 to implement GSL. And is it optional for the state? Why can't government make it a mandatory and yeah, enforce all throughout the state through the central government? So it was like 4 or 5 questions clubbed together. So basically, they wanted to ask you that is it an optional law, or is it a possibility that the government is saying that okay, it has to be mandatorily made in all the states across India?
So there are two aspects to this, but both of the aspects have the same underlying principle. One aspect is that of the Supreme Court judgment, which came on 30th of March 2016. Now, the Supreme Court judgment, essentially under Article 141 and 142 of the Constitution, made the judgment binding on all courts of India, which means that it had to be implemented by all states. Now, many states like Karnataka basically said that we welcome this order, and in order to implement the order of the Supreme Court, we will enact a state-level Good Samaritan law, which will allow us to implement this judgment in a better fashion, right? So that is the post Supreme Court judgment era. The second era comes when the law was incorporated into the Motor Vehicle Amendment Act, thereby giving it legislative backing. Now, post the Good Samaritan law in the Motor Vehicle Act, also, the states will have to issue relevant notifications to adopt it. Why? And why did the states have to do it earlier? The basic principle is the same, and that is that under the federal structure of India, law enforcement and public health are state issues. They're not issues of the federal government. The federal government may make laws, but the implementation squarely falls within the realm of the state. So if the state wants, they can pick up the central ruling exactly the way it is, the central notification, the central guidelines exactly the way it is, and implement it. And if they want, they can improve it, they can enhance it. If they want, they can incorporate into any of the existing policies in order to implement it. So the implementation lies with the state government. Road safety and public transport as an issue is on the concurrent list of the Constitution, where we have both federal and state working on it together. But there are many issues where the federal government can take cognizance of certain issues, but the state government has to implement it. And so our hope and our work with state governments is to encourage them to actually implement this law in its right spirit at the state level. So it is a national law, but there is no question, there is no doubt about it. But we will rely on states to implement it because law enforcement, courts, and the healthcare system are all within the realm of the state powers.
Okay, thank you. So I think I am just left with last couple of minutes. So I will close the session with last 1 or 2 questions. And one important question from of the students, the college community, clearly says, Piyush sir, we are ready to serve you and save life in any fashion. And we can spend all our time, technology, brain, everything for our country. So my question to you is, how as youth we can be involved in this particular GSL Act to spread awareness and save life. And my aim is to at least save 10% of fatalities in next 2 years. Is it possible from your side? It's a very nice question.
It's a great question. And I think this entire issue of road safety has really been propelled because of the youth. A great example of that is the Indian Road Safety Campaign, which came out of the IIT Delhi and is now part of many colleges, schools, and universities across the country, where young people are leading from the front. And I think for me, it can't be a happier moment to see more people joining the fight and coming forward to help. So young people really have the power to shift the scenario, not only as people who are advocating for this law, but also as people who can very quickly get to the victim and save that victim's life. So I would strongly suggest that you can do three sets of things. The first is that you can, in your community, you can start with spreading the message about the Good Samaritan law and having people pledge that they take cognizance that there is a Good Samaritan law and that they will come forward to help an injured person now without any fear. The second thing you can do is to set up a core of trainers within your group or within your establishment or within your university who are trained in saving an injured person's life. These are called basic trauma life support skills. There are broadly 3 skills in that. One is airway management, which includes CPR. Other is bleeding control. And the third thing is C-spine immobilization, which helps us lift an injured person and move them into a vehicle. And these are 3 essential sets of skills that you can learn. You can learn it through SaveLife, or you can learn it through any other establishment. We had a doctor on the call earlier who spoke about his passion of training people in basic life support. So these are, that's the second thing you can do, is to arm yourself with the right skills of saving someone. And the third thing which you can really do is to identify vulnerabilities in your own community. If there are friends who are regularly driving drunk, if there are friends who are driving without a helmet, if there are people who are, who feel that, oh, I just have to go 100 meters, what will go wrong? My cousin died very close to his house, and I know what it feels like to lose somebody who is that close to their home. So the assumption that nothing will happen to us if we are close to our home or our college is absolutely wrong, and we can play a role in plugging that potential loss by taking action. So if you can do these 3 things, and you can write to us, we can train you, we can make you a volunteer at SaveLife. I can send a link on this chat group after this session, so or before we close this call, so people can note that link. But that is something that you can do, and we'd be more than happy to partner and train you and help expand this chain of lifesavers across the country.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Piyush. I think with this, I think last one question which I would like to pose, and then we'll close the session with the concluding remarks. And I think just for the information of all the participants and also for you, we have close to 100 plus participants on the link today, spreading from All India Transport Commission, from the police, from the infrastructure authorities, to the corporates, to the student community, to the doctors, and also the paramedics in this list. Okay. So I got one interesting question which clearly says that funding is an issue with NGOs, if for that matter, any NGO in India. And all corporates are also spending the same money in various ways. So how can we stitch all this funding agencies together to work under one common cause? Because each corporate is driving their own interest in different directions, but everyone's vision and aim is to save life. So as of now, the similar thing has been, the practice has been there since a decade, and nothing is progressing in India. Some final thoughts on this. How do you think you can stitch all this with the help of all the agencies to pull in funding, number one, manpower, and also number two, with respect to the capacity building, number three, with respect to the competency building, and also with respect to awareness spreading, and also influencing the government. So around 5-6 points, if we all join together, I think this will be a great revolutionary movement in order to reduce lives. So your final thoughts on it?
The one good thing that has happened over the many years is that the focus around the issue of road safety has enhanced. And as a result of which, there is a lot more support now, which also translates to funding. There are a lot more people both within the government and outside, who really consider this to be a very, very important issue. And that is demonstrated by the number of participants on this call as well. What I have come to learn in the last 12 years of running Save Life is that if you do something good, you will always find support. I have had situations where everyone ranging from government officials to other NGOs to corporates, people have come forward to help us every time we have needed help, because they knew that what we were doing was needed, and what was being done with authenticity. So I think in order to attract support, it's important to focus on impact. It's important to focus on authenticity. And it's important to ensure that a lot more people understand the depth of the issue. Now, why did corporates and philanthropists earlier not fund this issue? They did not fund it because they thought that this is an issue of the car driver. It's a middle class issue. If I have money, I want to give it to the poor. Why should I give it to solve a middle class problem or a development problem? But now that people are getting to know that majority of those who are dying from these cars are actually breadwinners of poor families. They are those who have stepped out, who are pedestrians and cyclists, not out of choice, but out of compulsion. And that when they get run over, their families are pushed into poverty the same evening. Now that the awareness is coming through that this is a development issue, this is an issue that disproportionately affects the poor, is where the government support, corporate support, and philanthropic support is now coming through. So things will only improve. I would suggest that if you're looking to do something in this issue of road safety, please do it. Don't let constraint of funding initially to be a roadblock, because there is support available. And eventually, even if you show some small impact through a small budget, you can certainly attract a lot more support, a lot more funding going forward. So there is a lot more support, and this is a huge, huge, huge issue for our country when it comes to development, when it comes to economy, when it comes to the poorest of the poor in our country, because they are the ones who are the most disproportionately affected. We have people from the AITC here, and they would know that majority of those who are killed in trucking operations are the drivers who come from extremely poor backgrounds, and their families rely on their earnings to send their kids to school, to get food on the table. So imagine what happens when this truck driver is killed. So I think there is a lot of understanding, there's a lot of cognizance. This is a big issue, and there is a lot more support available. And I would urge and encourage all of you to do whatever you can, even if something small in your own space, to try and save some lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Piyush. I think we are out of time now. I think we just exceeded 7 minutes past 5. So I think this was really an informative session. And I would like to take this opportunity as an corporate employee from Bosch, and also as a board of advisors to IRSC, and also from the student fraternity, and also from all the participants to thank you for sparing your valuable time, and also spreading a message, and also making us aware of the Good Samaritan Law. And of course, there are hundreds of questions which just popped up. I could not cover everything in this short 1 hour. All these things will be emailed to you. Probably if you can have time, you can just give us some options. And also the link for this video will be up, and you can also keep this time as a live link, so that you can have this an active room for chatting and giving suggestions for saving lives. So thank you very much once again for this evening, and I wish you all the best. And we all are together for saving lives, and we all join hands for the near future to reduce the fatality of India. And wishing you all the best, and good evening, and have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Giri. Thanks, IRSC again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So, on behalf of the Indian Road Safety Campaign team, we would like to thank everyone for attending the session, and we appreciate your effort for taking out your time. And we would also like to thank Mr. Giri Kumar sir to take out his time for hosting this session and helping us with the process. So thank you, sir, very much, sir, for your presence. And now I would like to welcome Mr. Amar, who is also the founder of the IRSC, to speak something about the session and also about our host and speaker.
So sorry, we didn't know that the session ended and me and Aswaka Master spoke. Apologies for that. But anyway, it's all the same fraternity. He is also one important member of IRSC who can give you valuable suggestions.
Yeah, yes.
Um,
Yeah. So thank you,
Yeah,
Anupriya, for introducing me. And so thanks a lot, everyone who has sort of joined us today. And I think we are grateful to Giri sir and sort of Piyush sir for sort of taking us through the very important aspect of being a good Samaritan. And I think uh, why we started IRSC was also something similar, where we lost a group of seniors of mine to a road crash, and nobody sort of helped them, and they were lying there for 9 hours. So I think these issues, I think we can sort of reduce road crash fatalities very, reduce them by a great margin if we all sort of come together and help the victims. And as per a survey that we did for Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, around 60% of these deaths can be sort of prevented in case someone, a good Samaritan or a road crash support is provided to the injured within the golden hour. So that's a very important sort of aspect that we all need to come to. And as I saw a few questions, so as part of Indian Road Safety Campaign, now we are active in around 1500 colleges in India, and a lot of young people are sort of working with us. So our next goal is sort of how we can train them and make them trained first responders so that they can go out and help the victims. So any support that you anyone can would like to offer to that program, we will be really grateful. And let's hope that all together sort of let's all promise that we will undergo a training and sort of help any accident victim that we sort of come across. So that's all from your side. We will keep bringing such informative sessions to for everyone. And I yeah, so let's try that we keep on doing our bit to make Indian roads safer. So thank you everyone. Thanks for the session. Thanks for coming on a Sunday evening and attending a session about road safety.